Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to all different types of creators about their journeys into how they became the creators that they are. And today we are excited to be talking with Ryan McGinnis. Ryan has written several short horror theme stories that are available on his website. In addition, he's written the series Xavier Green Thriller. It's a series, and his latest book, which is a sci fi thriller, came out in March of 2026. So we welcome Ryan.
Hi,
Hey,
how are you guys? Thanks for having me.
we're doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Thanks
Good.
for asking.
Well, we appreciate you trying to work through the technical issues. Got off to a false start there, but we're sounds like we're good to go. Uh, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into things. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what sort of drew you into the writing profession. What were your formative years like, and what drew you to say, I want to write professionally?
I grew up in rural North Carolina. I grew up in a town called Stanley, which is outside of the Charlotte area. And I was always I grew up with a working class family, and mom and dad both worked, and there was a whole lot of using your imagination. I tend to think that I was raised in such a way that it fostered curiosity on my part, and I've managed to keep that my whole life. I grew up with my dad's guitar on my knee. I grew up exploring the woods around our house, and most of all, I grew up with there was a library near the junior high I went to,
Mm.
and I would walk there. Well, actually, when I was younger, my mom would leave me there during the summer. She would leave me there in the mornings because her insurance office was right down the road. And so all morning I would be in the library looking up books, looking up, like Ray Bradbury, other sci-fi and horror authors, because I was a weird kid. I wanted to read like science fiction and stuff like that, and so I was raised on that kind of stuff, and the library was kind of my babysitter. When I got older and I was in junior high, the library was right up the street from my school. So when I would get out of school, I would just walk up to the library and would hang out at the library until my mom got off work at 5. So I spent a lot of time immersed, in the library, and just being able to, as a kid, just go use the card catalog and find what I wanted to find, and that's back in the old days when you had to use like the real, pull out the drawer
Mhm.
and get the little cards, and
Mhm.
it was the old school times. And I think that the way those circumstances raised me in such a way that I continue to be curious and I wanted to explore. And of course, I found, with a guitar, when I was in my junior high years, started finding rock and roll, and I went on to be in a bunch of bands. Like once I got out of high school, it was just all about bands and stuff. And in my 20s, and um, toward the end of, I was in a punk rock band for, um, God, probably 9 years, 8, 9 years, and we were pretty big. We were on an indie label, and the label went out of business, and so we started our own label. When you start your own label, you have to learn how to do all your own stuff, which,
Mhm.
I was pretty much raised to do my own stuff. I mean, I always joke with my wife if we go to Michael's or somewhere, I joke that, when we walk past the construction paper, I'm like, nothing made me more excited as a little kid than for my mom to bring me home a pack of construction paper. And I would just go to town. And so that time in the band and having to do our own label taught me to do stuff like websites and flyers and graphics and all this stuff and networking and, booking shows and whatnot. And that all paid off later because when I left the band, I had left the band and I had other musical endeavors that I did, but I'd always had a very vivid imagination, and my friends and I would come up with all this like crazy stuff, and we would use the imagination in the band setting, like whether it was props for our stage show or flyers or stuff like that. Um, And my wife was the one. I've always said that behind every great man is a woman telling them to get off the couch. And my wife was that person. Yeah, my wife was that person for me. And because she was like, well, you've got all these ideas. Have you ever thought about maybe writing them down? And it was like, a light bulb goes off. And I'm like, oh, actually, I've never thought about writing them down. So that kind of started me on a journey that lasted quite a while to finally get me around to actually being an author. It was a journey that I did write a bunch of plot outlines and synopsises and whatnot, and I still haven't made books out of most of them. I have like an entire file full of like book ideas that I haven't messed with. Um, but I did pick one of the stories, which was the became the first book of the Xavier Green thriller series. It's a book called Tears of the Dragon. I did pick that outline and start messing with it because my idea when I did that outline was to do like a James Bond homage kind of thing, and it really ended up being more like John Wick. Just
Mm.
action thriller. High body counts. Lots of fight, a lot of action set pieces. I went for broke, and but that formed like that was one of those things where I did the outline and then it was kind of a hobby. I'd write a chapter here and there, and I knew from the start I needed to polish my writing. Because I'd been primarily a musician, and so I needed to polish my writing. And so over the years, I started doing work for clients where I would write blogs for them, or that I would write content for them. I wrote blogs for myself. I mean, the whole point was write, do a
Mhm.
lot of writing, hone your craft, practice, get to where you can do it, and you've got a voice. And so that went on for a while, and we moved to Wichita, Kansas, and I got a little more serious about it. And fast forward, I'd gotten quite a ways into the book, but it was always just that thing where, people, I played shows and stuff in Wichita, and people just knew that, oh, Ryan's working on a book. That was always like that was always the thing. Oh yeah, Ryan's working on a book. Yeah, have you worked on your book lately? But it wasn't serious. But
Mhm.
all the while, I was trying to get better at my writing and trying to get better at my craft. And I wrote a short story one year for Halloween. It's available on my website for free. It's called Sketch. And just on a lark, I saw there was a site, I don't even think it's around anymore, but it might be. Mandatory Midnight is a site where you could submit your horror short stories or ghost stories or whatever. And,
Mhm.
and they would pick certain ones and publish them. And they published my story. I sent them the story and I was like, I don't know if they'll do anything with it, and they published it and people liked it and I was getting views, and then I was hooked. Then that was the
Nice.
bug.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that pushed me to eventually finish that first book and actually put it out.
Uh, uh,
Well,
uh,
that's an interesting road.
Isn't
So
it though?
it is. And before we go on with the books, what was the label that went out of business? I'm just curious.
It was Yesha Records. It was just a regional label, but they went out of
Okay.
business, and so we had to start our own record label. So it's really funny when people ask me about my background as a writer. I'm like, well, I don't really have a background as a writer. I have a background as a musician. And I kind of look at it as prior to the pandemic, I was a musician. And
Mhm.
and in 2019, my wife got a job with the National Weather Service here in Brownsville, Texas. And so we were going to move across the country again. We're going to move from Kansas all the way down to the Mexican border, down to the tip of Texas. So I played my last show in November of 2019 with the intention of playing again once we got set up down here in Brownsville. And then the pandemic hit and the lockdown hit and we were shut down. And by the time we came out the other side of it, I was writing books. And was
Mhm.
actually, I was actually putting books out. And so it's like I went into the pandemic a musician and came out a writer, came out an author.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you a full-time writer now?
No, I am not a full-time writer now. I still run my own business during the day. So I wish my books could support me by themselves, but not yet. But we're going to keep working on it.
Over to you, Halfling.
Well, You've already covered so much with, with your
Well, it's
introduction and everything. So
sorry.
some of these questions may get to be, may get to sound a little redundant, but we're going to go for it anyway. Hey, we'll just
Absolutely.
have fun.
Sorry.
We'll just no, you're
No,
fine. It's a fascinating story.
look, Halfling. I just want Ryan to get his guitar and for us to jam out to some punk.
I how many decades has it been since you've held a guitar?
It's been quite a few. And the mohawk with it. Yes.
Well,
Uh,
we can after the show we can swap pictures and show each other guitars, because I've bought we've been on a binge. We've bought quite a few guitars lately. So I've got some new babies.
well, okay, so talking about your being a musician
Hmm.
turned writer. How I guess it's a couple of questions. How wh- do you have a preference between musician and writer? That's question one. But
Yeah.
question two is, do you feel like, you know, being a musician sort of paved the way for your writing? Did you learn some things as a musician that helped you slide into the writing?
So first question, that's a tough one. I mean, here's the thing. Music's always going to be there for me. I'm never going to leave it. Like music's always, I have played guitar. There's a picture of me when I was like, I think 4 years old with my dad's guitar on my leg. So, I mean, I don't think I'm ever gonna stop with music. I think I really did during the pandemic. I kind of walked away from it kind of hard, and tried very hard to kind of ignore it. But
Mm,
lately, I've been posting pictures of me playing guitar or videos of me playing guitar on my threads, and some of my social media. And so, do I ever think I'll completely be away from it? No. Do I think I'll play live shows anymore? Also maybe not. I mean, it depends, you
mm,
know. But I don't know which one. I think right now writing is my jam,
yeah.
and writing is what I'm doing, and music has been able to kind of become more of a relaxation, more than something I had to do, because when you're in a band and you're on a label and you're putting out records and it's okay, you got to practice, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to, it's like
Mhm.
you have to. Now I can just
Yeah.
play because I want to. I can just sit back and
Right.
chill.
Yeah.
So, but I think they feed into each other. I think as I spoke earlier, I think we figured out a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that happened when I was in a band that not only helped me with the writing, but also with my day job, which I do marketing and websites and stuff. And so I
Mhm.
learned all that, from having to do it in the band. So there's a lot that I've learned from that. And I think that like I was talking to my wife about, my wife's a big, she's an artist. I mean, she's a scientist, but she's also like a huge artist, and anything she can do, art and creativity, she'll do it.
Mhm.
And we were talking about the music the other day, and writing in different ways that I think they activate different parts of your brain, in a really wonderful way. I think when you're learning music and you're playing music and you can zone out and try to learn stuff, I think it rewires some stuff in your head. And I think writing's the same way. Writing's one
Mhm.
of the few things that I can do and just lose hours. I can just time skip. If I start writing and I think I've only been writing like about 30 minutes and I look up and it's 3 hours later, and
Yeah.
and that's an amazing feeling.
There's nothing quite like getting into that productivity zone and
Yeah.
just riding that wave,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. It used to happen to
Yeah.
me at work all the time, and I hated it when somebody would come and interrupt me for something. And I'm like,
You get in
don't
that flow
that
state and then,
I'm in the groove.
that's
Yep,
I'm
right.
in the
absolutely.
groove. I'm focused. I
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Brian's got the groove. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Uh, so, Ryan, which is more challenging, novels, series, or short stories? Tell us.
Mm, man, each one has their things, don't they? You know, like I think my opinion, because even when I write series, I only write them one novel at a time. I know there are people who write their entire series, and good for them. But I have to. This is the musician in me. I look at it album by album. You know what I'm saying? You know. So I even when I'm doing a series, I just write one book at a time. I will say that writing the act of writing a novel, and I've recorded albums, painted, drawn, done all kinds of creative endeavors. And I think writing a novel is probably one of the hardest creative endeavors that you can possibly do. And I've said it before. I think directors who make movies would probably argue with me that theirs is probably harder. But to me, from the ones that I've experienced, writing a novel is just because you start and you're excited and you pound out that first chapter, but you're like, oh, I've got like 65 chapters to go. I mean, it is a long, long creative process that you have to stick with, and you have to be there like week after week, day after day, month after month, to get to the end. But it's also very rewarding because by when you get the finished product and it's done and somebody writes a good review for it, hopefully, it's the best feeling in the world. So I would say novels, but I do understand that short stories are hard because you have to cram a lot of story into a small space. Series, it's the world building, because you have to everything has to make sense from book to book, and you end up building this whole big world, like the Xavier Green series. And so I think they all have their challenges, but I think actually the act of writing a novel is probably the hardest to me.
Oh, it's certainly fair. Certainly fair.
And I've got a little follow-up question to that. You were saying that, when you're working on the series, you're writing just one book at a time,
Mhm.
which is obviously true, but the series is multiple books. Have you planned out the entire series? Even if you're not writing each book, do you have where the series is going?
I would say sometimes. I think it varies. It varies. Xavier Green, when I wrote Tears of the Dragon, I originally intended it to be one book.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to be known as, I had all these different types, like you've mentioned, horror, there's sci-fi, there's all these different things I do. And I picked this like action thriller, very, I tried to unmacho it as much as I could and go against the the tropes that you would expect, from a lot of those. I tried to flesh it out, make it more human and make the characters more realistic instead of like some of these like, if you go watch an action movie and it's, like Jason Statham's newest movie or something, and they're cool, but these guys are all stereotypes, and I'm trying not to do that. But I intended it to be one book. And
Mhm.
while I was writing it, I was also doing a lot of research into the business side of writing because I do believe wholeheartedly that, writing is a business. You are an artist and you are creating, but it is very much a business if you want people to read it or you want to make money at it, which I don't see anything wrong with because I mean, it's like you're putting out your art, you want people to read it, you want to get paid for it, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
But I was reading, and at the time, the general advice was if you wanted to make money as an indie author and want to have success, you had to have a series instead of just one book. And so I actually changed the end of the book when I was writing so that it would have sort of a way. I won't say a cliffhanger, but it was sort of at the end of the book there was a thing where you're kind of like, oh, there's going to be more, and so I turned that into a
Mhm.
series. So it kind of
Yeah.
became a series as it went. Like as I wrote it, it was supposed to be one book, and then it just sort of was like, well, we can go back and visit this world, and now I've been back there like 5 times, and we'll probably be there a sixth time,
Yeah.
just to kind of wrap that up.
Uh, well, let's talk a little bit about the book that has just been released. It's
Sure.
Terrestrial, and it is a
hmm
sci-fi thriller. Tell us a little bit about it. Give us the elevator
Yeah,
pitch.
let's hear the elevator pitch.
Okay, so the elevator pitch. I don't know how short of an elevator pitch do you want? Because I've got two different ones. I've got medium length and I've got very short. And which one do you want?
Let's get the
Um,
medium then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, let's
sure.
do that. Let's do the medium one. Let's do that. Let me pull this up. I'm obviously going to be reading this, so I'm looking off to the side. Well, I don't want to mess it up. You guys know.
I understand.
Okay. All right, all right. The impact was only the beginning. The United States faces a natural disaster of epic proportions when multiple meteors strike across North America. But while the country is reeling from the destruction, no one suspects the contents of the crater could alter the course of life on this planet forever. A team of scientists struggles to counteract the threat while dealing with a skeptical government more concerned with its poll numbers than with the environmental changes caused by the meteors. But something has awakened deep within the crater, and it knows exactly what it wants. High above the Earth, the crew of the International Space Station faces its own crisis. A meteor fragment has struck the ISS, knocking out communications. Now, with systems failing and trust at an all-time low, the crew must come together if they're going to survive against an invasive stowaway that seems to adapt to their every challenge.
Ooh.
That's the
Wow.
medium. That's the medium length pitch.
Wow.
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 That would make a heck of a movie.
Yeah, it definitely would.
It
Uh,
would. Come on, movie people, or for that matter, TV show people. You know, we could turn. I
no,
thought it would make a great TV show if Apple TV's watching. Come on, guys.
Well, you never know.
Right, right.
Uh,
but yeah, that sounds terrific. Yeah. So I'm going to encourage everybody out there that's watching or listening to grab that book because I think it'll be a heck of a read.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. My mother actually read it, which is really funny. My mom doesn't read my books, right? I mean, she's in her 70s and she's a very nice woman, and she doesn't read like, well, my other books, The Tears of the Dragon and all this stuff. She's like, why is it so violent? Yeah.
Ah,
And so when I came to North Carolina, I brought everybody. I had some extra copies where I had gotten promo copies, and there was a mix up at Amazon, and they said they weren't going to send it due to a technical difficulty. So I ordered another batch of author copies, and they still ended up sending the first batch too. So I ended up having like way more books than I meant to have. And so when I came back to visit, I brought some autographed copies for my family and stuff, and I gave her one, and Mom read it, and she read it in like 3 days. And I was
wow.
like, so what'd you think? And she's like, basically, I think she just sat down and just she said she couldn't put it down, which is how I designed it. So, hey, the book works,
Ah.
but no, she was like, well, what you think? And she's like, it's very suspenseful. And so I'm like, I think I kept mom up at night because I don't think she was wired to read that kind of stuff. And so,
I
I
get.
kind of warned her. I was like, now look, mom, this isn't like my other books. It's not as violent as the other books, but there is stuff that happens. And I'm just warning you, be careful when you're reading it. I just want to warn you.
Yeah.
But she thought it was very suspenseful, but it is actually getting really good reviews. So I've been very happy with the reaction to it so far. You know, even beyond my own mother. My own mother liked it, which is cool.
Well,
But
you're you're
it is getting good reaction out there.
you're doing better than me. I can't get my mom to watch my podcast, so so
That's okay. I was in a punk band for 9 years, and I got my mom to listen to one record, and she hated it. So, I mean, it happens. Art is
uh,
subjective. You know what I'm saying?
oh, absolutely, and it's a generational thing too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right. Well, you've given us your pitch. Let's talk about your process. One of the things we want to do is try to help people along the way, and they really enjoy hearing about other people's process. So, could you walk us through your process, taking an idea from the initial inception all the way through the completed book?
Yes, yes. So the way that works with me, the way it's always worked, well, one, you have to have an idea. And as far as where I get my ideas, it can be anywhere. Like people have asked me, where do you get your ideas? I'll be watching the news or I'll be scanning a website and I'll see a news story and I'll be like, how can I take that and turn that into something, that's interesting, and so you take it and turn it into stuff. Or you're inspired by something you saw or heard. But in any case, once I get the initial idea, I sit down and I come up with basically what I call an outline or a synopsis, however you want to look at it. But it's
Hmm.
basically it's a Cliff Notes version of the book. I'm very much
Mhm.
a plotter. You know, there's people that are plotters, and there's people that like make it up as they go along, and I've tried that. But I'm mostly a plotter, and basically I write an outline where each paragraph is a chapter of the book. You know, that's how it ends up being. Like it is not even like very descriptive paragraphs. It'll just be like, very sparse, just setting up the scene and telling what happens in it, and then, or I don't know, I have had it when I'm really into a book. It starts out like that, and then as I get toward the end, all of a sudden it's like large paragraphs, where I'm like describing everything because I'm getting really into it. But I write the outline, and then I open Scrivener and I set up my template. I use Scrivener to write, and you have a folder for each chapter, and so I'll put the paragraph for that chapter in the little note. There's like a little scratch pad, and I'll put it there in each chapter so that it's there. And then I just, once I've got that worked out, I'll sit down and start. Each chapter is just me taking that little short paragraph and fleshing it out into an entire chapter. And I do that for the whole book. Um, but during this process, I also 9 times out of 10, I start whittling away at the story or messing with, I know there's people that say you're supposed to write the entire first draft, don't touch it, just put it out there. No, I already start whittling away and adding stuff. And for instance, with Terrestrial, it was inspired by Kurt Vonnegut and originally by his book Cat's Cradle, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And I started out when I wrote it had more of a humorous tone and more of like a lot more Kurt Vonnegut type stuff in it. And when I finally got around to writing it, like 5 years after I made the outline, um, I decided to make it more modern in tone. And so I improved that. And then as I was writing it, um, of course, due to current events and whatever, I tweaked some of the characters in the book, to better reflect, stuff that's going on in the world. So I wanted it to kind of be like a modern reflection. And then also the biggest thing I did was the opening chapter takes place on the International Space Station. But
Mhm.
originally, that was the only time you saw the space station. It was just going to be for the teaser in the first chapter, and then you weren't going to see it anymore. And while I was writing the book, and I was probably 10 chapters into the book, and I decided that I thought there were interesting things I could do with the International Space Station. It's such a fragile environment. It's so claustrophobic. I'm like, man, we could if I can figure out how to get, you know, one of the things that I'm not talking about because I don't want to spoil it, but one of the things onto the station, that could create some really good drama. It's a really good tension. And that's really, I mean, that's what you're trying to do as a writer. You're trying to create tension and create bad situations to get your heroes in and out of. You have to get people in trouble and then figure out how to get them out of it. And so it's like I am a plotter, but as you hear me sitting here telling you, it very much things change as I'm writing. Like I will start out with a definite plot, and by the end I will have taken this chapter out and added this, or in the case of Terrestrial, add like probably added 15 chapters, 15, probably almost 20 chapters where I did the International Space Station story, because I just wrote it and then had to figure out how to wedge it in there, and keep the pacing right. So
Mhm.
but I do that and I get the story written, and there's a lot of whittling and a lot of winding around, and I get that first big draft, and honestly at that point it's almost a second draft. I feel like the first draft is my outline and my synopsis, and then as I fill it out and start whittling away and moving chapters and switching stuff around and eliminating characters or putting characters in, by the time I get to the end, I'm like, this is pretty much it. And then of course is the editing process, which gets yourself a good editor. I do before I even mess with editors, I do tend to run it through. I usually run it through Grammarly, just to make sure I've got some of my grammar right and just stuff like that. I'm not an AI user or anything. I don't delve into any of that stuff, but I do use Grammarly, which some people, I guess you can say some of that was AI, but I don't use it. All I use it for is to, hey, do I have my all my commas in the right place? Do I have, is there any verb tenses that I've missed? Before we go, that's like the rough edit before you go to the editing phase. And then by the time we get through the editing phase, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, the story's been whittled down further, and the rough edges have been sanded, and usually by that point, there's already a cover that I've designed myself, and we've already got the pre-order going. I usually do that when I'm getting close to done writing the book. Like if I'm about three-quarters of the way through the book, I'm like, okay, now we can do a cover and we can do a pre-order and go ahead and get that going. So that's kind of the process, a very rough, version of the process, but you know, I'm very organized with it. I'm not. I know people. I have friends who just write. They just sit down and they're like, I'm just going to start writing, and whatever comes out, I'm going to create this story, and that's cool. But I don't know if I'd ever finish a book if I just sat down and did that, because I would just be too much what if, and what was that I meant to do? I forgot. So for me, I have to plot it out. I have to write a big outline. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a little rough. I was kind of all over the place there, but that's kind of the way I do things.
So, Ryan, now comes the most important part of our interview.
Oh no, I'm scared.
Where where can people find out more about you, and where can people find your books, including Terrestrial?
Well, you can find everything about me. The easiest way, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Threads, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram. But the easiest way to find me is on my website, which is ryan-mcginnis.com, which I'm sure you guys mentioned you were going to put in the show notes. But
Yeah.
ryan-mcginnis.com has all of my links. It has all of my books. It has links to where you can buy the books. And there's a lot of free books. There's a lot of free short stories on my site. And I'm going to add more as I get time. I stay very busy. But I do intend on adding more free books. But right now, I think there's three. I think there's three free books on the site. So three free short stories. One's a novella, and then two are short stories. So, but links to all the books, my blog, and all that jazz. And as far as where you can buy the book, you can buy it everywhere. The Xavier Green series is Amazon exclusive, so you can only find it on Amazon. But Terrestrial is out wide, and so it's available at on Kindle, Nook, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Kobo, Kobo Plus, Bookshop.org, which is one of my favorites, Smashwords. It's even available in the library system. So, it's all over the place. It is wide. It is
Well,
as wide as I've ever put a book out, and that's an unusual experience. As somebody who spent 5 years just doing Amazon, and now I've put a book out wide, and I'm like, okay, there's a whole other side of things out there that I had not met with.
It's a
um,
whole new world out there.
yeah.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that's so amazing about how the industry has changed, because there are so many different venues now,
Hmm.
to get your books out, and so which I think is wonderful. um, so that's great. That's great. And again, I'm encouraging all the folks that are listening, watching, to grab a copy, listen to a copy, because terrestrial sounds really cool. Uh, but in the meantime, Ryan, want to thank you so much for joining us. It has been a real pleasure. We've had a lot of fun getting to know you and talk about your book, your process, and all sorts of other stuff, including music. Um,
It's
so
all
thank
it's all
you.
tied together. It's all tied together.
That's right.
All right. And we also want to thank our audience for joining us today. And we hope you've been inspired and entertained by today's guest, Ryan McGinnis. And this is the Spaceman, as always, for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.